Today's topic is what I call knowledge increase. You might remember that I mentioned that it's basically learning. Why I use the term knowledge increase rather than learning is because I wanted to emphasize that it is not only the classroom type learning, not only something that can happen from reading books. It includes other kinds of learning which we traditionally don't exactly call learning. For example, if we are talking about skills, it would be about practicing. But mostly this is still about learning. So, of course, the essence of learning is about what happens with your knowledge. So this is not really dealing much with the other potentialities. It is kind of focused on the knowledge only. So the first thing is, if you remember how we talked about cognitive schemata, you can think of learning as an absorption of new knowledge. Now, if you observe new knowledge, what happens with it? And I have a very weird experience in my own previous life, and I think that probably many of you have something similar. So I attended a class or whatever, so basically one afternoon session many years ago, and at the time I did not know much about quantum physics, and this was about quantum physics and Taoism, and I also did not know much about Taoism. So I attended this class, and it was an absolutely brilliant lecture, and I understood everything. It was so clear and so on. And then I went back to my student accommodation. It was my student years. So I went back to my student accommodation. I had a roommate, and he asked, so how it was? I said, it was absolutely brilliant. He says, what was it about? And I said, it was, and I already could not tell what it was about. So it was absolutely amazing. I did not have absolutely any previous knowledge to which I could connect the new thing. And although it was very clear, I understood it, as I did not have anything to connect it to, I could not store it, I could not remember it. So it took me quite a lot of further learning in the area of quantum physics and philosophy that I would be getting to the point when I was able to understand that stuff. So if you look at the picture on the top, so you can think about it as knowledge which is available somewhere. Obviously, if it is not available, then you need to create it, and it is not a kind of learning process, it is something else. So what is interesting about the new knowledge is that if it is linking with two different things in your mind, you can attach the same new cognitive schema to two different areas. And it can even mean slightly different things in those two different areas. So as many areas you have to which it can connect, it will connect if it is presented this way. Now, this is why I am always using these everyday examples, so that you find something where you can connect the new cognitive schemata. So this is why, for example, I never use business examples in this class, because you will have work experience from completely different areas. And if it does not connect for all of you, then I am not doing a very good job about doing something for your learning. So this absorbing new knowledge, this is what we call learning. Now, if we zoom into this thing, so what happens when you connect the new cognitive schemata to your existing ones? It is not an additive process. So it is not just that you add the new thing to the previous ones. That also happens. So the new one is the small x thingy. And if you see the x in the bottom picture, made 4 new connections for itself. It connected to A, G, B, and E. However, this is not all that happened. It also kicked out the previously existing knowledge item F. How can that happen? Probably you learn that something that you previously thought you knew is incorrect. So it just disappears. It gets sort of replaced by the new cognitive skill. It can also break up existing connections between items that were previously connected. In this case, it breaks up the connections between G and A. Now that means that you figure out that there was an oversimplified relationship between two knowledge items previously in your mind, and you figure that they are not that simply connected. And it doesn't mean that it established the connection between G and A. So in this case, you would realize that they were connected. What was the one that I thought that I had? Yes, between B and D, that was the one that disappeared. And that means that you realize that it is not such a simple connection, and you can still get from B to D if you look at this. Just it will be the line of B, X, E, C, D. So it is basically telling you that it is a more complex relationship between those two knowledge items, not just a simple direct connection. Now, this also means that when you learn something new, it is not just added, so it is not just a sort of quantitative difference, but it also means that the knowledge becomes slightly more complex. And that leads to an interesting problem, which I call the principle of doubtful knowledge. This is coming actually from the philosopher of science, Karl Popper. So what he said is that apart from that, he was also one of the proponents of the idea that learning does not work in the way of a pyramid, so that you always just add the new knowledge to the previously existing one, but that you also demolish and forget and revise and so on. However, he also said that you can either achieve higher complexity or you can achieve higher reliability. So you can be more certain about what you know. The two don't work together. So if you learn new stuff, it will make your knowledge more complex. More complex knowledge is less certain, so you can doubt it more. What that means, the trivial example would be that it will be raining on Saturday. And I add another, this is a knowledge item, and of course we have, unless you live in Glasgow, in which case the probability is 100%, then this would have some probability whether it will work or not. If I say that it will be raining on Saturday as well as on Sunday, there is obviously a smaller probability than if I only tell you that it will be raining on Saturday. Now, this is an extreme example, so it's extreme oversimplification, but it shows you how the reliability, how sure you can be about something, it decreases as the complexity increases. Now, this means that when we learn, we are making our knowledge more complex, and therefore we will also make our knowledge more doubtful. So this is a very weird thing, and you probably heard people saying that only those who are really ignorant are very sure of themselves, and this is a very good reason for that, because if you don't know much, the knowledge is so simple that you can pretty much rely on it. But as you learn more, it is coming with self-doubt, it is coming with well, it might be working this way or that way, or maybe some other way that I cannot even figure out at the moment. So more complex knowledge is more nuanced, and therefore it is also more doubtful. So if this is the case, and we usually, for a complex problem, need complex knowledge to provide a solution, then how we can validate any knowledge? And the kind of Western approach would be that the facts will validate it. if we are talking about science, experimental validation, and so on. And yes, it does something in some areas. Unfortunately, it works really well in really simple areas. So if you, I don't know, want to test free fall or something like from elementary physics, that works pretty reliably. If it comes to quantum physics, that is not the case anymore. And if you get to the realm of human beings, that is very far from reliable. So, for example, what they do is that they want to, I don't know, build a model about how finance works, stock market, that kind of stuff. And what they do, they represent what people do with various random variables. That has nothing to do with anything. It is complete nonsense. Where is the idea coming from? Because in physics, about when they wanted to figure out, I don't know, what is happening with the air in a room, they figured that the air consists of molecules, and they could not describe the move of any of the molecules, but they could still say something about the air in the whole room. So how they did that? It is called statistical physics. And what they did is that they represented the individual molecules with some sort of random variable. And although it does not tell you anything about the single molecule, it will tell you something about the air. And yes, it works very well in these kind of incredibly simple situations like the air in the room. Why? Because there are billions and billions of molecules in your room at the moment, regardless how small your room is. And we are talking about physical movement, which is a very simple aspect of behavior. Instead of that, if you think about stock market or marriage or anything where humans are involved, they make intentional decisions. They want to achieve something. They do something either to achieve a goal or because some value is dictating for them that this is the right thing to do. And what all the people together do will somehow come together from these individual decisions. At the same time, those people are also linked, and what they do influence each other. And there is incredible level of complexity in that, because it does not only matter to you how many people do this or that, and then you make your choice. It also you have to make your choice before you even know. So you are guessing what other people will do, but it is also not indifferent who is the person. So if there is a person who you trust in that particular area, then what that person does is more important for you than what all the other people do, and so on. So it is a very messy situation. So how can someone tell then whether this knowledge is sensible or not? And the answer that they came up with, again, still coming from Karl Popper, is that it is a sort of interpersonal verification, but not anyone's interpersonal verification. It is the interpersonal verification of those who are really good in that field. Now, this actually works in science as well, only we don't talk about it. So, for example, one of the very popular papers that I wrote is with my former PhD student, Igor Pirko. It is called Thinking Together, and it is about how people think in communities of practice. And it is a very popular thing. It was published only 3 years ago, and it has more than 200 citations already. How that happened? Why is it so much more popular than anything else I have done before? Actually, the explanation is very simple. There is a guy who is the guru of the communities of practice, and his name is Etienne Wenger. And he is like the world #1. He invented the concept, he wrote about it a lot, and basically it connects to his name. So obviously he is invited a lot to various conferences, events, and so on to talk about this. So when we have shown him what we have done, he said that this is really excellent stuff. Write up a short practitioner version for me, which we did. And he took it next time with him when he was going to do a talk. And he said, guys, apart from my work, the work of these these three people are worth reading, so read the Thinking Together in addition to my books. And this is it. So we got endorsed by the guru of the field, and that was the guarantee of becoming impactful. So there were three items in the literature that were kind of a must cite always if you write about communities of practice. Today there are four, because our paper made it to the next. And you can see already that we just published a couple of months ago another paper on communities of practice. It is already getting picked up very fast, so already like 8,000 downloads from the publisher and so on. So this is it. So if it is accepted by the guru, then the guru endorses it, and everyone in the field trusts the guru. Therefore, it becomes impactful. So this is how knowledge is validated in the real life situation. It is not a well-structured process. It is not about what you can prove, because basically there is nothing you can prove. You come up with an idea, with an explanation that makes sense. If you remember from the types of reasoning, there was the abductive reasoning, which is about coming up with an idea, and the only thing that you look at is how it fits the observations. So this was our Thinking Together explanation, and it made sense to the guru, and it seems to be making sense to many other people as well. So the other thing is that if something is knowledge in the sense that it influences your thinking, unless it is in your way, so unless it has a direct negative impact, you don't get rid of it. Okay, so normally simply because we don't use something, it still stays there, and it might not be easy to retrieve it, but it is still there, and it will come out when and if needed. So let me come back for a little bit in case there are any questions.
See, Victor, are these slides on my place? I can't seem to see them.
Oh yes, I hid them. Sorry, you will have it end of the class, okay? Or actually, I will try to do this in the break. I will. So you will see that we will have a little bit of a different setup today. So we will get it there to you. We were changing the slides yesterday, so.
Right, that's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Victor,
yep.
Would you mind just repeating that very last point you made there about using knowledge?
Yes, if it is not bad for you, so it does not get removed something from your knowledge just because you don't use it. It will kind of become dormant, but it will stick around.
Right.
And when you need it again, you can retrieve it. But if it is kind of having a negative impact, so it prevents you from thinking in a way that you want to think based on your newly acquired knowledge or something, then you actually kick out some, as I explained it on the first slide.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Welcome. Anyone else? Okay, so then I will go back to sharing the slide. Give me a second. So we have a relatively bigger topic coming up now, which is about talent. So I will do that, and we will have the break later on because we just need to. My mouse disappeared again. So let me. Okay, managed. Do you see?
Yeah.
Yes, I forgot to click this. Do you still want to learn when when I am messing up your knowledge by giving you something new? But I see that you want. So one of the very important things in terms of learning is talent. I very much like the English term for talent, which is the gift. Why is it called a gift?
Because you're like giving it.
Yes, You did not do anything for it. You did not work for it. You did not deserve it. You just received it. Okay. This is a very important characteristic. Yes, thank you. So that's why I always say that I do believe that anyone can be a world champion, but not in any discipline. So you have not seen me in a great deal of detail because we are only on Zoom, so you only know my head. But if I would decide that I want to become a ballet dancer instead of a teacher, it would not work for me. So I would not be any good at that. I am simply not talented, and of course part of that is that my body is not really of the type that a ballet dancer would have. So this is not working for me. So you are talented for some things, and there is a huge debate, of course, about the importance of talent. I think that if anything, the importance of talent is underestimated. It is of incredible importance. So how you figure out what you are talented for? That's or what is the talent? So there was a very interesting debate because Howard Gardner did some excellent work on talent, and there were some who were criticizing this work, and they said that it seems more like it is motivation, it is about where you learn fast, it is about this or that or that. And Howard Gardner had a really short response that yes, this is exactly what talent is. So if you notice, for example, that you learn faster in some area, then that is a likely place for which you are talented. If you are doing the work and it feels more like playing, that's a good sign that it might be that you might be talented for something. So, for example, if you you probably have had some of those really weird classmates who like doing mathematics. So if doing mathematics feels like playing, that might mean that you are talented for what? If you are the things that you are playing with in mathematics in the elementary school or secondary school, what can be that a sign of talent for? What do you think?
I don't quite know what you mean.
So you do these mathematical tasks and it feels like playing, so you might be talented for whatever it is that you are doing, but what is it? Okay, I will tell you because I don't think that it is, from this wording it might not be very clear. So it is almost certain that you are not talented for mathematician, because elementary mathematics does not even resemble what a mathematician does. If you are good with this kind of playing with the numbers, then you are either talented for accounting or finance or for engineering, because these are those types of areas that feature that type of calculations and such. Okay, if you look at what a mathematician does, it is this kind of work in incredibly abstract structures. So that's why I always say that in terms of my background in mathematical engineering, I am much more an engineer than a mathematician, because I did not get into these kind of abstract structures. That was never really my thing. I understand mathematics as philosophy, and that works for me, but the rest is more on the engineering side. Okay, does it make sense? Okay, so let me get back to slide. I got back my mouse in the meantime. So if you need to do the job and this is effortless, yet it delivers performance that is sometimes even weird in terms of that you should not be able to do it that well kind of level, and you sometimes just do something that you never even learned and you don't necessarily even notice that is a good sign of talent. So The best definition, or what I use as a definition for myself, is based on what an elementary school teacher told me. She was a teacher of mathematics, and she said that, you know, when I have a kid who is talented for mathematics, it feels as if that kid already has the mathematical structures in her or his mind, and all I need to do is to put a label on them. But those mathematical structures already exist. And that gave me the idea that actually this is a possible explanation that might be literally true. So you remember how I was drawing these pictures about cognitive schemata and such. So what if the everyday knowledge, the common sense knowledge of that person has a structure which is similar to the structure of knowledge in a particular discipline? That would explain why the learning is so fast, because the pattern of schemata already exists in the mind of this person, and you just show that this is how this works. So, for example, when I was doing my I never understood what you can learn about mathematics. So it was only at the higher years of the university when we started to get into these more abstract things, when I started to have something that I could actually learn about mathematics. Before that, it was that, well, you showed me that it works like this, so now I know. And I noticed that there were other people who were practicing how to do the mathematics, like problem-solving tasks and that kind of stuff. I never did that. I did not understand why they would be doing that. So you have understood how it works, now you can do it. And anyway, so this is very much the type of talent. Of course, as it comes out, I was not talented for mathematics, but more for the other side. So I'm sure that you have heard that usually it is the journalists who say things like, oh, it was 10% talent and it was 90% hard work. That's utter nonsense, a complete stupidity. So this has nothing to do with how it works. They are right about one thing: hard work is important. Why? Because talent is not performance. Talent does not make you good at something. It gives you the possibility to become good at something. Okay. So talent only becomes something that performs if you develop it. So you need to invest the hard work so that you can realize your talent, that you can develop your talent. And of course, if you do that, then you will have, let's say, the potential to accomplish. So talent is a potentiality to develop, let's say, an intelligence or a knowledge. And that is then a potentiality that can be used. So the talent is not the same as knowledge. So someone called me talented a few years ago and did not understand. It was supposed to be a flattering, and I got upset. And this person said, so why? I was paying you a compliment. I said, no, I was talented when I was 8 years old. Now I am simply good at what I am doing. That is not talent. I already developed my talent. Now, what is the difficult part about this? It is that developing talent takes a lot of time. So I already told you that the number of cognitive schemata can increase by an order of magnitude every 2 years. And as we had about 50,000 cognitive schemata at grandmaster level, it is not very difficult to figure out that it takes about 10 years to get there. It also means that it is about 10,000 hours that one needs to invest. If you do the calculation, that's the same sort of number. Bad news, there is no shortcut. You cannot make this faster. You cannot just become faster in developing your expertise to grandmaster level. it is not working that way. And of course, the other bad news is that if you stop doing it once you achieve the grandmaster, which never happens, because the grandmaster loves doing what they are doing. So, but if you would lose your grandmaster level. So it is not something that you achieve once and then it is forever yours. You can actually use it. So if you, I don't know, look at world-class piano players, they are still practicing, I don't know, 4 hours a day, and they are composing another 4 hours, and then they are performing and so on, and it adds up to 8 to 10 hours a day still, after they already achieved the grandmaster level of knowledge. So it is still the same kind of hard work. There is no being great about something without the hard work, but the hard work in itself is not enough, as I said. That's why you need the talent as well. I could work really, really hard, I would still never become a world-class ballet dancer. So this is what I meant by the last question on the slide. So would you actually, should you play tennis? Well, it depends whether you are talented for it, but it is if you are doing it for competition. If you are doing it for fun, then why not? Of course, it is a very nice thing to do. So, okay, I will leave just for a moment in case there are any questions, and then I get back to the next slide.
There's one comment there in the chat from Josh, just saying that it's quite frustrating that you could be really talented at something and might never find out.
Yes, yes, and this is why I actually tried to write up the version of what I'm telling you today and put it out in some kind of practitioner and private person oriented outlets, or some magazine or something. So I tried like 10 different things. New York Times, Atlas, Forbes, so all sorts of things that many people read, because helping, for example, parents to understand how to discover talent would be a really cool thing to do. And yes, if you are talented for something, you never discover it, you can spend your life in frustration and unhappiness, because you will never have the feeling that you fulfilled what you could achieve, and that's really bad. So I agree, it is beyond frustrating that can happen. So
Victor, does it mean that everybody will have a talent in something then? It's just that it's not been discovered? Right, okay.
I believe that everyone is talented for something. Maybe you are not talented to be the world #1, but top 10 is also not too bad, no? So I believe that everyone is talented for something, but I don't believe that everyone is talented for the same thing. And this is why I don't like the school system, because it educates everyone the same way. And of course, I understand that that is what we can do, because there are lots of kids and not that many teachers. But we could do a little bit better on trying to discover the talents. And pursuing your talent is one of the greatest things that you can do. So, if nothing else, I have another 2 slides about talent. So, not over yet. Okay. So let me go back to that. Okay. So the next one. I don't know if you are familiar with the GNT test. It is a GNT tests. It is a very big deal in the US. I don't think it is that big deal in the UK, but they still exist. So there are 2 types of the GNT stands for gifted and talented. That already signifies how badly they don't understand what they are talking about, because it is the same thing. So it is like, I don't know, not even like chairs and furnitures, but like tables and desks kind of thing. So they are talking about the same thing. So the very important thing, different disciplinary talents come out at different times. So the youngest can be talented for music and mathematics. These are the first 2 that appear. They can emerge already at the age of about 4. Later on, it comes, for example, in the natural side, next is physics, then after physics, chemistry, after chemistry, biology, and so on, until you end up with the social things. So basically, you cannot figure out if someone is really talented for something like sociology or politics before the age of about 50. So that is what features the latest. If you look at, for example, grand novels are the same category. So if you look at grand novels, not a single great grand novel was written by anyone who was younger than 50 years. So it just does not work that way. I mean, the talent can be noticed probably a little bit earlier, but it cannot be developed before you get to that age. Now, there are two types of these GNT tests. One is called achievement tests, and that basically measures performance. So if you do that, why it does not tell you much, because you can do the same test with or without preparing much for it. So for example, you know, heard perhaps of the Formula One driver Jackie Stewart. He was doing some helping out at the Formula One field, and at one time they agreed that he is allowed to drive one round on the one round with the Formula One car, and they measured just for fun, and he has beaten the record. Why is this important? Because that was the first time that he drew a Formula One car. And this is when the achievement test would actually make sense if you do it completely unprepared, untrained, and so on. So that does not tell you much about if you just call the kids, and some of them were trained for the last 5 years to get through the test, and the others did not train at all. So the achievement tests are not really good for this reason, because you cannot make sure that the preparation level is the same. If someone is in a better school or a worse school, that will make a huge difference in how they perform in an achievement test, and it does not tell anything whatsoever about how talented they are. The other is what they call the ability tests. They supposed to mean to measure some sort of potential, but as far as I can tell, the only one that works really well is the IQ test. And the IQ is not very indicative of many other disciplines that are not based on convergent thinking. It is good for some things. For example, if you want to figure out who will be excellent in a quiz show or in a crossword puzzle or that kind of stuff, the IQ test is something that can help you a lot. But if you look at, for example, who will be a better artist or I don't know what, then it does not tell you absolutely anything. So if you observe kids, you can, one of the things that you can recognize as a talent, if they play something different than what others play or what they have seen or learned from others, or if they play something differently. Generally, it is about doing different things and doing something differently, but of course, an easy way is to observe when they are still kids. It is also very useful to get an exposure to grandmasters. I liked very much when the Commonwealth Games was in Glasgow. They had this session organized when you could bring kids if you think that your child is talented for, I don't know, X type of sport. Then someone who is really good at sports, so sportists and coaches were looking at the kids. Now, this is fantastic because they can see things that others cannot. So basically what you want, if you suspect that a kid is talented for something, let a grandmaster have a look, because they will see in almost zero time whether someone is talented or not. And if not, it still might not be a bad thing to learn a bit that, just don't count on being really good at it. So, for example, when I was a kid, they took me to the music school, and there was this kind of entry exam or whatever. And what they did, they played something on the piano, sing it back. Now, I was just terrifyingly bad. So what I was able to sing back did not even resemble what they played. They tried it with one tone. I could not replicate the one tone even remotely. So they said that to my parents, okay, come on, but this kid is really, really bad at this, so don't force him to a music school. And my mother really wanted me to go, so okay, is there any other way? And she said, okay, so here is, and she did a kind of rhythm like, but a very long, very complicated rhythm. Can you repeat it? And I repeated it without any mistakes. And then she was surprised. She gave me something even more complex. I did that without any problems as well. She said, okay, he does not have any ear whatsoever, but his sense of rhythm is quite good. So, okay, but you need to know that he will suffer. And I was. So I was really not performing well in the music school. However, it was incredibly useful for me, because I, with this very, very hard work invested, I managed to achieve a level that I don't, I can sing in a pub with my friends. Okay, so it is not any level of performance or something, but people don't run away if I am singing in a pub. It is kind of acceptable. It is not particularly good, but it is acceptable. And this is the best probably I can do in this area. But it was still worth, because I happen to love singing. And if people run away if I start, that's not very good. So sometimes it is worth pursuing also something you are not talented for, but pursuing what you are talented for is far more important. Another very significant sign or possible sign of talent is that you see that the intuition works when it is not supposed to. So simply your knowledge did not achieve the level yet that would make your intuition work, and yet it does. You just know things without knowing how you know them, and that is a very, very important sign of talent. And the difficult thing is that this rarely happens, so you need to be around a lot to notice this. And of course the kids will not notice because they don't know what to look for. So I talked actually to Howard Gardner about this. I sent him this small piece that I wrote about the talent, and I asked him what he thinks about it, and he liked one part, he did not very much like the other part, and I figured that there was a bad wording. And then I told him that, when I was 1.5 years old, I told my friends that if Howard Gardner would have seen me when I was 1.5, he would have known that I should be a researcher, an academic, because I was always asking why. And if someone explained to me, then I said, okay, and why is that? And they explained, and then, okay, and why is that? And I was annoying people really seriously, because I would never stop asking why. And he said that actually there are lots of kids who ask why. So based on that, he would not say that I need to become a researcher. However, those kids who ask why, and then they listen to the answer, and they understand it, and they build it into their knowledge, those are the people who are talented either to become researchers or artists or investigative journalists. So these are kind of what he has observed, and I said, okay, so now I will tell the story with his input. This was just about a couple of months ago. Okay, let me stop again for a brief moment, just in case there are any questions, and then I have one more slide, and that will be the last one about talent. So, any questions? Okay, I go back then. So, do you think that this guy was talented for fiddling? Do you recognize who that is? He was certainly talented for something, just it was not necessarily the music. His name is Albert Einstein, and he was playing the violin, but as I understand, not very well, but he really liked to do it. So what you need to do to develop your talent. So if you suspect that you are talented for something, or maybe you got some reassurance from some grandmasters or something that you are talented, then you need to do 3 things, or you can do 3 things. The first is try to develop the big picture of the field, and I will show you something later on about this, but it means that you listen to and read the words of the gurus of the field. Why is that important? Because the gurus work with the big picture. So you're not listening to the details. You can read all that stuff on the internet, but it is not enough to cherry pick the details. Why you need to listen and read the original works of the gurus is because this will paint the patterns of the relationships between those details. And this is the important part, how things are arranged in that field, because this will gradually develop your big picture, and through this big picture you will be able to make sense of all the details. It does not work the other way around. You cannot build up the big picture from the details. The second is that you need to become a connoisseur. So you need to become an enjoyer of the experience of that domain. So it is what my grandmother said a long time ago, that she never trusts a chef who is skinny. And this is obviously not to be taken literally, but if you are a chef, then you love to eat. If you don't love to eat, you cannot possibly be a good chef. So you need to enjoy that domain first, and then you can become a creator or whatever is the best thing in that domain. It does not matter whether we are talking about football or mathematics or cooking, it is all the same. You need to enjoy the domain. And not only that, you also need to develop your judgment, to be able to recognize the best in that domain. And not only to recognize it, but you will very quickly end up in a place where nothing else is good enough for you, only the best is good enough. And that's really almost the definition of being a connoisseur. And finally, you need to find yourself a master. So you need to get into a master-apprentice relationship. And the reason for this is that this is the only known way how the grandmaster level knowledge can be achieved. And this is also the only way how you can pass on tacit knowledge. So this is, not here now, give me a second. So I wanted to come back. So this is what I wanted to show you about the talent. And I have 2 slides now, which I want to use to do an experiment video. You need to pay very keen attention. So I have a picture on the next slide and also on the one after that. So what I want to do, the picture will not appear at once. In both cases, the picture will appear gradually. So I want to ask you all to turn your microphones on, and as soon as you recognize the picture, just shout either the what it is or just shout that I got it. Okay, in both cases, and I will be measuring the time, how long it takes to recognize. Actually, I will ask Susan to measure the time. I cannot handle this at the same time. So okay, so turn your microphones off. I will switch back to the slide and shout when you recognize the picture. Okay. So when I click now, the slide changes. As soon as you see the new slide, the pictures will start appearing. Shout when you can. So now.
Pinocchio?
Yes. Excellent. So here you are. Okay, let's do the same with the next. Yes. Let's do the same with the next one. Okay, Susan, measure again the time.
Pinocchio?
Pinocchio?
Yes. So here it is. I don't know if the measurement was working, Susan. Did it? Did it?
Yeah, I've got it.
So what was the first and what was the second?
The first was 11.6 seconds and the second was 2.6.
Yes, that's roughly about right. 5 times faster. What is the difference? In the first one, in this case, when I said that it is about the details, it was building the picture from the details. Okay, gradually adding more and more details, you get to the big picture. It is possible to do it, and this is, by the way, how the bachelor level education works, because you cannot work with it in any other way because you need to acquire those details. However, what should be different in terms of the master level education is that you don't build it little by little, you show the whole big picture at the same time, and all of it becomes more visible, sharper gradually. Now, that means that it becomes recognizable much faster, but of course you see it better, and more details become visible in the big picture as you go on. Okay? So this is what I wanted to connect with the development of the big picture. Susan, how do you feel about doing your part now?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so Susan will now talk to you about her favorite topics. So she will start sharing the screen, and that is called the threshold concepts. Susan, you can give me any tasks if you want me to measure the time or something. So
No, just prompt me if I forget anything.
okay.
Okay, everybody see that okay before I start?
Yes.
Okay, some of this I've kind of touched upon in some of the tutorial groups already when we've been talking about memorizing stuff, the difference with learning it, but I'll go through it. A bit of a whistle stop tour just now, and we can discuss it in next week's tutorials. Okay, so very briefly, threshold concepts are quite a big part of my PhD research. It is, as I've said in a few of the groups, it's very kind of deep learning. It's not just remembering something. It's not kind of something that you learn for the sake of learning. It's a much bigger thing. It's basically a big personal experience. What I'm going to do just now is run through kind of some of the characteristics and some of the key points that you'll come across if you're reading about threshold concepts. And then I've got some examples that I can use to try and help it make a bit more sense. As usual, it's not going to make total sense by the time I get to the end of it, but we can discuss it in the tutorials next week, and hopefully it will start to come into place a bit then. Okay, so originally threshold concepts were described as being like passing through a portal, whereby when you went through this portal, like we've all seen in films and read in books, you're in a new world and things look differently. The things that are in that world you can't see before you go through the portal. It will become a bit clearer what I mean by that in a minute. It's the polar opposite to memorizing and rote learning. I know some of the examples we've spoken about in the tutorials, like people have spoken about memorizing equations for finance and then forgetting them straight after the exam. It's the complete opposite of doing that. You're not just memorizing something to regurgitate it. depending on what it is, it might change your perspective on yourself, change your perspective on the world, or a bit of both. It's not something that you can be taught to experience. It involves the person learning it being emotionally invested in it and kind of willing to get on board with all that is involved in letting this change happen. And as you might think, with something that changes your view of the world or your view of yourself, it's not an easy process. It's not a quick process. It can take a long time, and it tend to be kind of, you're going back and forth and doubting yourself and picking up new things and coming to terms with things a bit more. And again, there'll be different levels of that depending on what the actual concept that you've got in mind is. But one thing that I think is quite important that can be a bit confusing is that a threshold concept will always be difficult to learn, but not everything that you find difficult to learn will result in a threshold concept. And once you've learned it, after it's been so nicely difficult to learn and to get there, it's also generally impossible to go back to where you started off. There may be times when people can unlearn this new learning, but that will take a process that's just as kind of convoluted and complex as the original one had been, if not more so. So everybody's probably nicely lost right now, so I'll go on to my next slide. These are the core characteristics of what makes an experience or a concept a threshold concept. They don't all apply in all cases because everything is different for every person. So you can't kind of say this is definitely what will going to happen. The ones that are absolutely necessary are that it is transformative, which is that your perception of a certain topic, your worldview, or your identity will be changed once you've mastered this concept. It's integrative, which means it brings together things that were seemingly unrelated beforehand, but it all kinds of clicks into place once you have had this experience or mastered this threshold concept. And the bottom one, the liminal, this is a big part of it as well, that it is a journey or a rite of passage. It's not just memorizing something, it's not getting from A to B, it's a much more involved process. And then the other characteristics will generally apply as well, but it can be a bit more subjective and a bit more dependent on the topic. It's irreversible in that it's difficult, if not completely impossible, to unlearn. It's bounded in that, well, similar to what Victor said before about like becoming a grandmaster, you're a grandmaster in that one area. So your threshold concept applies to that concept. It doesn't necessarily apply beyond that. Although, again, in some cases it might, depending on how much of it shift in your perspective or your sense of self that you have. It will be troublesome as well. You can come across things that seem counterintuitive, that are in direct conflict with what you had learned before or with your personal beliefs. I've got an example from my own experiences that I'm going to go through in a bit that will help with this a bit more. And then the reconstitutive, it does change your perspective. You have a shift in your subjectivity. Okay, this is a diagram that I tend to use to illustrate that it's not a linear process. Okay, so if you look at the top line, the preliminal is where you encounter this new knowledge for the first time. The liminal is while you're battling with trying to take it on board and make sense of it with your previous experiences. And then the post-liminal is after this has happened. So the actual threshold concept experience is like the second arrow on that top line. That's where you come out of the difficult liminal phase and go into the post-liminal, like as your new self. I've added the right-hand side one as well, just as a little bit of an illustration of like the liminal from the diagram on the left looks quite simple, like pre-liminal, liminal, post-liminal. But while you're in the liminal phase, like this squiggly line is probably what's going on. You're going like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, examining everything, making progress, doubting yourself, feeling like it's not ever going to happen. Is it worth happening? Should I even be trying this? and then it all kind of eventually comes together at the end. Okay, that is all quite, it's all quite general and quite vague. So I'm going to try and use some examples to help it make a bit more sense. Some of them aren't necessarily threshold concepts, but might kind of help you to visualize and understand the kind of level of learning that is involved in it. So the first one that I usually use is the butterfly. So you can see my lovely illustration of a butterfly there. This isn't really a concept in itself, but it does help with the irreversible transformative aspect of it. Basically, before a caterpillar can become a butterfly, it goes into the cocoon. So if we think about it like as a metaphor, where the caterpillar is at the preliminal, the cocoon is the liminal phase, and the butterfly is the postliminal. The caterpillar, when it goes into the cocoon, stops being a caterpillar and then becomes a butterfly. It can't be a butterfly without going through that process. And once it has been through that process, you can't change it back into a caterpillar again, because that's gone. That is quite simplified, but hopefully it helps a little bit as well. And then the reason why I've got a globe on the right-hand side is another example that tends to get used. I'm not entirely sure that I think it's a really good example, but we'll give it a try anyway. It's basically that if you believe that the world is flat, and then you discover that it's not flat, you can't, if you've been invested in that belief and then discover this, it's quite a big change. And then you will start seeing other things that make sense and make that clearer to you now that you've seen that it is a globe, that is in fact true and not what you'd believed beforehand. There's another example that I'm going to use, and this is quite a personal example from my own life of a threshold concept that I have experienced. But I'm going to share it because I think that it demonstrates quite well the different areas that can be affected and can be changed when this happens. Not to kind of go into too much kind of unnecessary detail, but I came back to do, you all know by now that I did the same undergrad course that most of you are doing, but I started that in my early 30s. So before that, I had got married quite young, I'd had my kids, I'd worked in different jobs I was never quite happy with, but kind of just like went along, like, okay, this is how life is. When my youngest son was starting school, I decided that I wanted to do something different. So I applied to go to university. I'd not been to university after high school. I had just gone into work. So I started off doing, there's an access course that you can do in the university if you've not been in education for a while, to help you get back into education. So I started that, did that part-time for a year, and then started doing my undergraduate degree. What happened then was I started off not sure of myself. It was a bit kind of, I don't know if I'm smart enough to do this. I don't know if I can do it, but we'll give it a try. So I started, and I found more and more I was getting interested in different topics, and I was learning more. And as I was getting kind of good grades and discovering that I was good at it, I got more confidence, and then that encouraged me to push myself a bit further. And well, I'm here doing my PhD now, but that's the shortened version of it. This is relevant. I'm just giving you the background of how it all came together. But that increase in confidence didn't come on its own. Because I increased in confidence and had more belief in myself and what I could do, that had an impact on other areas of my life. So what happened was, again, long story short, I ended up getting divorced because I was like, well, I've changed this one area of my life I wasn't happy with, and then started realizing there were other things that I wasn't happy with and that I could change it, that because I believed in myself, I could change it. That in itself is quite a big change, but there was other aspects as well. I come from an Irish Catholic family, so getting divorced is just not done. So through all this, gaining confidence in myself and making changes in my life, as well as the obvious kind of conflict and turmoil of going through a divorce with kids, I had to deal with quite a lot of issues with my family, with what I'd been brought up believing. I wasn't particularly religious by this point, but the cultural aspects were still there. So I had to kind of stand up for myself and stand up against my family and stand up against my own feelings of this is not right, this is not what I should be doing, I should stay married for the rest of my life and get on with things. So, well, I did get divorced. I did speak with my family. We did sort it out. It wasn't fun. It was convoluted and it was complicated. But after I did it, I had this kind of overwhelming feeling of I am me now and I am doing what I am supposed to do. There wasn't any of that doubt or that I'm living up to other people's expectations. It was like, I am doing what is right for me and I have found my place in the world. So it's possible, it's not that interesting a story to anybody else because it's my personal story, but hopefully it's kind of given you some idea of how that like one change that I made had an impact on like loads of different areas. And there were a lot of things that I had to kind of contend with and battle with. And not only that I had to convince other people, but I had to convince myself before I could convince anybody else. And if I hadn't done that, I would never have, I don't really like how the phrase sounds, but I would never have found myself and I would never have been me. I would have been this kind of reduced version of me that was living with other people's expectations. So not all threshold concepts are quite that extreme. Some are just related to letting you, some are just related to letting you become a member of a profession. So it could be that there's a threshold concept that lets you change from being an accounting student into being an accountant because you've started to think like an accountant. There could be a threshold concept that lets you change from somebody who plays football to being a footballer because you've changed your thinking in there as well. But some of them are these massive, massive things that have a huge impact on your entire life. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense, like the kind of scale that there is involved or that there can be involved in it. I'll go on to my next slide. I'm done talking about myself now. Okay, so what I touched on at the start, it goes beyond what you can memorize or what you can learn from a book or what somebody else can teach you. You have to experience it. You have to live it yourself and bring it on board yourself to let it happen. So it can't happen without that emotional investment. Quite often the person experiencing or working towards the threshold concept doesn't know that this is happening. But you'll see it with hindsight. Like going back to my own example, I didn't kind of go, well, I'll go to uni and I will learn this and then I'll get divorced and we'll all live happily ever after. It happened over time and I didn't like it when it was happening. But with hindsight, it's like, well, this is the best thing that could happen. That this is what was supposed to happen. People around you can quite often see you changing before you see it yourself. Like if it's in a professional environment, the people who are mentoring and training you might realize that you're coming very close to getting it while you're still going, this is terrible, I don't even know why I'm bothering. And with my own experience as well, as part of my research, I was feeling very brave one day and I thought I would ask some of my friends to tell me what they thought about me and how I changed over the past few years. I was interested in seeing how my own experience of it kind of tied in with what people who were close to me had seen. They did kind of confirm that like they knew it was coming. They knew I was going to get divorced before I knew I was going to get divorced because they could see me wrestling with things and making my peace with things, and that was kind of shaking things up a little bit. Pretty much like everything else we've already spoken about in the class, they're going to be different for everybody. Somebody the same age as me who started university at the same time, who got divorced at the same time, will not have felt that experience in the same way. And that will apply again on the kind of more formal learning related threshold concepts as well. They're context specific, but like, as I've just said in my own example, it can go quite beyond that. But the context there is perhaps knowing who I am and what I want from life, what then had a ripple effect. And yeah, I'm not going to get remarried, so I'm not learning that again. So that is gone. Those previous beliefs are gone. I'm not going to relearn them. That is pretty much my whistle-stop tour of threshold concepts. I did have a look. There's some that I thought, books that I've read and films that a lot of people have seen that have things that are maybe touching upon being a threshold concept. But when I look back at them, I didn't think they were particularly useful for explaining it properly. I think right, okay, so spoiler alert, if anybody's not seen the last Avengers film and is still planning on seeing it, you should probably mute me round about now. But if you look through the whole series, Tony Stark is really, really selfish. And then towards the end, he eventually makes the right decision for the greater good rather than himself. There are a few moments kind of in the Star Wars film, like Kylo Ren battling with whether he's on the dark side or not. And others like that. There's one in, if anybody's read The Amber Spyglass, there is a moment where Lyra is talking to a nun and the nun speaks about why she stopped being a nun. And all of these, I think, because I know what a threshold concept is, I can kind of see how they're edging towards a threshold concept, but I don't think that by themselves they've got everything, because obviously screenwriters and authors are not trying to convey this message, but they might help if you're trying to think of kind of lighter examples to help you understand it.
I think it is also a kind of a point that when you manage to catch the threshold concept, you see it everywhere. So that concept works for you and it fits into many different contexts simply because you came on terms with it. And I have to tell that Susan came up with the threshold concept when she was sitting where you are. So it was right about the time of the assignment. And after the third year, she took on an internship where she started exploring the threshold concepts, and then in her honors dissertation, and then in her PhD. So she managed to get a really strong hold on it. So I think it is a fascinating story in itself. And thank you very much, Susan, for this. Okay, so do you want to tell just the link?
Mm-hmm. The link is there. You don't really need it from the slides. I've opened up the tutorial section on threshold concepts, which has that link in there as well, if anybody wants to go and look at stuff before the tutorial. As I said, I'm not expecting everybody to know exactly what it is by then, but I think we could have some quite interesting discussions next week about ideas and what people have thought, and about how I've overshared about my personal life, but you all just had to listen. So thank you all for indulging me and at least pretending to listen.
And thank you very much for doing this, Susan. It was an incredibly useful contribution. I would like to go back. Sorry, yes, please do the clapping. It is, Susan, very well deserved.
Clapping. I like clapping. Like bad.
However, I still need to do something with you, so I'm sorry, but I will actually continue this. So I will leave out a few slides now. So this, give me a second, I did not manage to start the sharing yet. So why is it not there? Okay, now it is there. So the next thing that I wanted to tell you about was a little bit more details about the master-apprentice relationship. I can talk about that for about a week. So I will leave this until we get to the advanced topics, and I can tell you much more about it then. Now, the next. I will leave out these 3 slides for the reason that there is an additional version of this class which I pre-recorded a few years ago. I left out most of those topics today. So the doubtful knowledge principle and the first slide, these are included. The rest is different. So there are 3 models, and there are these things about the teaching and learning that I included here. So please look at that video because it is still relevant. But this is the one slide that I still want to do with you because it is just incredibly important. This is basically about the process of becoming competent. So I call darkness the ultimate ignorance when you don't know anything. Okay, so what happens is that on one hand you are going through a learning process which is typically like this classroom type or book type thing where you learn new concepts. These concepts are then validated in an intellectual context. What I mean about it is how you play with the new concepts in your tutorials. Okay, but it remains completely in the realm of thinking. Now, in order to become competent, this is not enough, because if you only did this, you will become like Sheldon. So you would be the knowledgeable incompetent who cannot use that knowledge for anything. So you have another direction of your development, which is the experiencing. So you need to redevelop the concepts that you learn at the university in the applied context. So, and you need to validate it through practice. So basically use it in real life. Now, the actual development, so actually becoming competent, is going back and forth between the learning and experiencing. And this is really where Susan's threshold concept fits so well, because it does not happen without experiencing. Okay, even if it is the most abstract thing that you can imagine, it still has to be something that you experience. And I would even say that another threshold concept that Susan has was the threshold concept. So and it stuck around for quite a long time. So it is very important. You are going back and forth with this. You hear something, you apply it in your job, you get back, you learn another new things and so on. And you are going back and forth all the time between these two. And of course, the experiencing side can be supported with a corporate university. And I gave a talk in 2013, I think, at the European conference on e-learning, and in 2012 at the European, it was the Corporate Universities and Academies Summit, where I talked about this, that this is actually how the universities and the corporate universities are complementary. So the universities are in this kind of intellectual context, and the corporate universities can support the bringing in the applied context. And therefore, the competence requires both the learning and the experiencing. This is why I put a multiplication symbol between the two, because if either of these two are 0, then your competence is 0. Okay, so thank you. This was all that I wanted to cover.